welcome to the Universalist Church, in which love is the spirit. We are glad you are here in the sanctuary, or anywhere in the world, visiting or returning after a time away. I'm Sherri Englehart-Shea, one of your representatives on our Board of Trustees. If you are a visitor, we hope you'll talk with our welcome team or visit our webpage, www.westhartforduu.org, to learn more about us. Our guest book or online contact page will help get onto our electronic mailing list. Our electronic communications are the best way for us to stay connected. We look forward to helping you become a part of the Universalist Church. We're in the season of colds, flu, and COVID, with many more people feeling ill right now. Masks are always welcome here, and we encourage you to stay up to date with your vaccinations. If you're unvaccinated or would like a mask, our ushers have some that we're happy to share. After worship, we'll have fellowship in Fisk Hall and through Zoom. If you need help finding your way to Fisk Hall for our fellowship hour, any member of the church will be happy to guide you. Just look for someone wearing a Universalist Church name tag. You can find the link for Zoom in your weekly news or our Breeze calendar. If you aren't getting the weekly news, please sign up for it on our website. Today we'll be meeting in Fisk Hall as well as through Zoom to ratify our annual budget for this fiscal year. Please plan on attending our community meetings so that we meet the needed number of participants to meet our quorum requirements for our voting process. I now invite you to take a moment to make your mobile phones silent, turn off your email, put away your keyboards, and settle in for worship.
If you have a home chalice, for all those viewing us from afar, please pull it out and light this chalice with us. As we light this chalice, may we be reminded to embrace our history and the mystery of grace that surrounds us in it. The mystery that called to all our ancestors and their family members as they celebrated the International Holocaust Remembrance Day this past Friday. That ever-present reality that describes and touches us often, deeply and endearingly. And yet we can't exactly describe how grace touches us, but it does. May we be grateful that grace calls us always to go deeper, to remember in our core humanity who we are called to be and who we are called to become each and every day that is filled with grace. Our opening hymn is hymn 219 in the great hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit in the sanctuary or wherever you happen to be. Standing and join me in speaking the words of our affirmation, our covenant, as printed in the order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated. Our time for all ages today is a difficult story to tell, but the child who wrote it, she is someone who has shared it in order that the story be told. It is a story about a little girl named Suzanne who lived in Paris. She remembers loving being a 6-year-old girl in the city because there was so very much to do and to enjoy. Suzanne used to walk along the Seine River and run it across all the bridges that crisscross that river in the city. Her mother used to put her on the carousel and she would ride up and down and up and down on the really gorgeously designed horse. And she and her mom watched the marionettes in the park. Suzanne described her life as lovely and cultured. She remembered going to preschool. She also remembered she didn't go to that preschool very long. Suzanne remembers her life changing little bit by little bit, very slowly almost. Then, the first change in her life was she wasn't allowed to go outside anymore. Then there were the very loud noises outside the building where she lived that were really, really scary. She was told eventually that all the shouting and the noises were because their area of the city was occupied. She really had no idea what the word occupy meant. After all, she was only 7 years old. Suzanne remembers a very hot August day when her father stood at their apartment window on the 3rd floor of their building and said, "They're here." Immediately, her mom pushed her under the bed. She could hear boots on the stairs coming to their apartment home. There was loud banging on their door. Suzanne remembers her parents stayed in the bedroom with her, but then she heard an axe puncture the door. The soldiers grabbed her parents and told them that they had to pack a bag. "Hurry up," they shouted. During all this noise and disturbance, Madame Collum, Susan's next door neighbor, came into the room and grabbed Suzanne, saying to the soldiers who were there, "What's my child doing in this apartment?" Madame took Suzanne's hand and took her away. What Suzanne learned later is that if the soldiers had realized that Madame Collum had been doing what she was doing, they all would have been shot in that moment in time. Suzanne spent the next 2 or 3 weeks underneath Madame Collum's dining room table in a lovely bed that she had created for her there. She was lonely and very scared. She had nightmares there, and she never saw her parents again. Suzanne was one of several thousands of children during the years between 1931 and 1945 that were corralled into different places and held in those places. The death toll exacted by the Nazi regime on Jewish children in Europe is one of the most appalling chapters in the history of the Holocaust. The Nazis targeted all Jews for death, but the mortality rate for children was very, very high. Only 6 to 11% of the European pre-war Jewish population of children survived. Suzanne is one of those children, and she is grateful every day that she was provided the grace to call herself a survivor, that she had a Madame Collum to store her under a dining room and take her out to a farm in a remote village. Suzanne's hope in sharing her story is that no child will ever have to experience something like this ever again. May Suzanne's wishes come true. Let us sing our children out for Sunday.
We'll sustain this war.
voluntary offering, the sharing of our resources for our shared work as a religious community, is a spiritual practice here. By offering your time, talent, and treasure to this community, you help us serve the members, friends, and wider community of this congregation. As part of that service, we share our general offering each week with organizations that do work in the world that bring us ever closer to creating the beloved community. This month, we share our offering with Trans Voice and Visibility 365, known out there in the community as TV 365, a ministry dedicated to uplifting and supporting the well-being of transgendered individuals and service coordination and support. This ministry also works to support and collaborate with relevant support groups and service providers. Their emphasis is on those most underserved, neglected, victimized, and oppressed. This includes, but is not limited to, transgender people of color, those with disabilities, trans youth and elders, immigrants, documented and undocumented, low-income trans folk, and those who've been victims of crime. So to give electronically today, please use the QR codes in your order of service, the links in the description on your computer, or those on our website to make your donation to this offering. Here in the sanctuary, our offering now will be gratefully received. bless this treasure and the time it took to give it, so that it will help this community, but also extend the love that created this treasure into the larger community. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit as we speak our congregational reading, number 439, We Gather in Reverence. This reading is written by Sophia Lyon Fobbs. Sophia, for more than 80 years as a professional educator, practical theologian, and author, strove to create a theology that restored human emotions and human experience to their rightful place as foundational building blocks for an enlightened liberal faith. I will speak the words in Roman type, and we will all speak together the words in italics. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life.
The wonder of this moment.
The wonder of being together, so close, yet so apart.
Each in our own secret chamber.
Each listening, each trying to speak.
Yet none fully understanding, none fully understood.
We gather in reverence before all intangible things that eyes see not, nor ears can detect.
That hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure.
Let us sing together our doxology. Please be seated. This morning I have a mixed bag of news from the congregation. Julio M. Jr. had stomach surgery this past Thursday. He is recovering in Manchester Hospital and would appreciate your prayers and thoughts. The surgery was very successful, by the way. You can place cards for him in our card basket on the table as you go out today, leading into our sanctuary from across the program center. Jen K. is having outpatient shoulder surgery, say that 15 times fast, this coming week. Please extend your thoughts and wishes for a successful procedure to her. Krista H. is still recovering, but there are many signs of hope on the horizon. She hopes to be home this week. I will keep you informed of her process and procedure. And finally, I invite all of you to Fran T's memorial service, which will be held on Saturday, February 12th at 1 p.m. here in our sanctuary, followed by a reception in the program center afterwards. Let us also include in our prayers the family, friends, and neighbors of Tyree Nichols, the latest young black man killed by police, as they mourn the loss of their son, husband, father, friend, brother. And may we pray that each one of us acknowledge and take action to root out our collusion with the racist systems of which we are a part. The systems that still today, each and every one of them, mete out injustice, violence, and hatred. We pray today with the words of Reverend Marta Valentin, to which I added mine. We pause this morning from the chaos of the world to reclaim the beauty within these walls that carry us through our week. We lift this community onto our shoulders with pride and grace-filled expectations for our children and our children's children. A grace that comes through the pages of our human history to teach us that taking pauses can be critical in our spiritual lives. Pauses that allow grace to slip in. And now, please join me in moments of silence. May our week ahead allow us to take moments so grace can truly slip in.
Our first reading today is adapted from To My Beloveds by Jennifer Bailey. Hear these words from the New York Times best-selling writer, Adrienne Marie Brown. Things are not getting worse. They are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. I don't know about you, but the suggestion that things are not getting worse comes as a surprise. Each day, we are inundated with images, videos, and words from screens and social media feeds about how divided we are, and questions about whether our nation will be able to survive. The message is clear. These are dark days. the likes of which we have never seen in our 240 plus years. Yet, we have inhabited darkness before. On the fields of Gettysburg, at the F.W. Woolworth lunch counter in Greensboro. We have forced Native sons and daughters to walk a trail of tears in the name of manifest destiny. Exploited laborers in the name of economic progress. And placed our citizens in internment camps in the name of national security. When I listen closely, I can hear the voices of our ancestors crying out from the soil across time with one voice. Remember! Remember! There is power in memory. That is why I believe that the ancestors continue to call us to it. Our second reading is from The Way of Grace by Miranda McPherson. Grace. It is such a simple and beautiful word, a word that tends to lighten our mood and inspire us when we hear it. Regardless of our spiritual background, and even if we have not been interested in spirituality as such, we can recognize something that has been here all along. In the background of our awareness, and arising more explicitly in our transitions and transformations. Grace is not a thing. It's not something we can touch, although we may feel touched by it. It's not something we see, although we may very well see the effects of grace on ourselves and others. It's not something we can hear, yet we may feel called by it. And it's not something we taste, yet there is some particular sense to it, and some tastes may remind us of its presence. Further, grace is not an emotion, although it may produce many emotions, even profound states of feeling. It is not a thought, though when we have experienced it, we are likely to have a lot of thoughts about it. It is not a sensation, although the action of grace may well produce sensations in our body. To find the realm of grace, we need to look deeper, beyond the usual categories by which we navigate this world. Clearly, as with all the most important inner elements of being a human being, grace is something subtle and found in the deepest places of our hearts, in the very fabric of our consciousness. Its presence is unmistakable, and we do indeed learn to recognize the sensory signals that let us know we are in proximity of this mystery.
Our song, Ani Ma'amin, is an ancient Hebrew affirmation of faith. The text, which is centuries old, can be interpreted as follows. I believe in God, in a greater truth, and in things greater than this world, in spite of all that has happened. I believe that the Messiah will come, and he will find me waiting. No matter how long he tarries, no matter how long he delays his coming, I will continue to believe. No matter what the future holds, I believe. The song has had a rich history in the heart of Israel. It gained its greatest significance, however, during the Holocaust. Thousands of Jews entered the gas chamber, singing this very song, proclaiming allegiance to God until their last breath. Eyewitness accounts tell us that the music would decrescendo to silence only as the gas choked the singers.
No matter how long he tarries, he will find me waiting. Today we sing Ani Ma'amin out of respect for the faith for which so many millions of children died. Today we sing Ani Ma'amin, knowing that if we join hands and hearts and voices and sing the songs of those who suffer, we will learn that while we may be different, we are all truly beautiful. And if we, the children of the world, value all other children as beautiful people, we can prevent such atrocities from happening again in our lifetimes. This is why we sing. This is what we believe.
The question I pose before you today is, when are moments of grace? Was that a moment of grace? I am certain I drove my parents to the brink many times because of my endless questions. By golly, I often drive myself to that same brink. My mind just works that way. The idea of grace fascinated me, has for years. That word, that idea, was in my 4th grade vocabulary list, but never could be explained well by all the adults that surrounded me. So, as was my precociousness that has been retained up to this very day, I just kept asking and trying to discover its true definition. And so, in our service, we have already heard a few explanations of exactly how grace might work or be a part of our daily lives. We've heard it in our story. We've heard it in our music. We've heard it in our readings. Suzanne experienced grace through her neighbor, Madame Collin, as did thousands of children between the years of 1933 and 1945. Suzanne also experienced grace through her grandmother, because at the end of Suzanne's story, as she's explaining how she left the farm where she lived with the goats in the barn to stay warm, she says her grandmother from East Castle came to pick her up 2 years after the war ended, by the way, because they were so remote, they didn't know the war had ended. So, was it grace that allowed Suzanne to understand what really happened to her? Perhaps. Jennifer Bailey in our first reading speaks to the voices of our ancestors that call upon us to remember, to take Adrienne Marie Brown's words to heart and realize that this is indeed a time to pull back the veil and to hold one another tight. I did while I watched the video from Tyree Nichols yesterday and Friday. In our holding of one another, are we expressing grace, demonstrating its power in our lives? And in our third reading from Miranda McPherson, she notes that grace is something subtle, something found in the deepest places in our hearts, in the very fabric of our consciousness. Its presence is unmistakable, and we do indeed learn to recognize its sensory signals that let us know we are in the proximity of this mystery. So, were all these examples of when grace comes into our lives? Perhaps. I'm going to suggest today we have multiple moments that we do experience grace touching our lives. Our history as a human race offers us many insights into grace. I'm further going to posit, from my experiences as a minister, a chaplain, an educator, and a mystic, that one of my core beliefs is that grace and surrender are intertwined. That surrender is a deeply intentional and profound action that provides the space, the moments for grace to slip in and be present. Even if, in those exact moments, grace itself is unrecognizable to us. I want to use 3 views from history that this intertwining of surrender and grace can and do deliberately leave us with questions to ponder about grace and when it is there or not. The first view is from Elie Wiesel. In the re-release of his 1955 French translation of Night into English, in the preface he wrote, he notes the harrowing story of the night he stood by silently, watching his father being beaten to death in Birkenau concentration camp. How his father called out to him, saying, "Elijah, my son, come here. Come here, I have something to tell you. Come, don't leave me alone." Accompanying his father's cries, Eli wonders in his amazing and horrendous reflections within the book Night if his father's plaintive, harrowing voice, one that went on piercing the silence and calling him, nobody but him, were in fact the moments that allowed Eli the ability to write, to say the words that needed to be spoken out loud, to give voice to this reflection, which Eli writes in the book. Quote, "I only know that without this testimony, my life as a writer, my life, period, would not have become what it is. That of a witness who believes he has a moral obligation to try to prevent the enemy from enjoying one last victory by allowing his crimes to be erased from human memory." None of us has ever experienced anything close to this level of horror. Eli survived, and in his survival, he continually asked if it was so that he could give meaning to that survival. Were his moments in Birkenau with some 600 or more children surrendering to the realities of inhumane cruelty moments of grace? Some of the children who have written about that experience respond by saying, "Absolutely." Others, who are still living with the horror, like Suzanne, in their memory, aren't quite sure. The second view I wish to share is from a book called Only What We Could Carry, which is a book of essays pulled together about the Japanese-American internment experience. This quote is from the essay Statement to the Commission by Elaine Black Yoneda. Elaine Black Yoneda was a civil rights worker and someone who worked to right the wrongs of the internment with her husband. Elaine notes, "Contrary to common belief, the internment of enemy aliens during World War II was not limited to Japanese Americans, the West Coast, or even the United States. Simultaneous forced evacuations and internment incarcerations occurred in Alaska, Canada, Mexico, Central America, as well as parts of South America, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. Within the camps, boredom, frustration, and political friction, both between the administration and the internees and between different generations of Japanese internees, grew into physical harassment and violence." Elaine describes the beginning of the internment. About 7:45 a.m. on December 8, 1941, 3 FBI agents came looking for my husband, Carl. Carl was a longshoreman working on Pier 45 in San Francisco. He was born in Glendale, California, but raised in Hiroshima. The agents searched our small upper 4-room flat, taking nothing, and made snide remarks as they looked through my Christmas War relief cards that I was preparing for Christmas and New Year's messages. They called them a good cover for pro-Japan activity. Soon after they left, I was informed by two neighbors that additional agents with submachine guns had been posted on roofs facing the front and rear entrances to our home. Elaine was 35 years old in 1941, and she began keeping a diary. And the reason she kept it was because she and Carl felt that the internment of the Americans of Japanese ancestry without any hearings or trials would have to be addressed someday. So, in this view of our humanity, in the 8 months Elaine spent in the encampment, when were there moments of grace? Did all those people who lived in the Manzanar and Death Valley camps try desperately to aid and help one another? Were those moments of grace? In our moments of grace now, in 2023, do we extend our love and compassion to our Asian neighbors, colleagues, and friends? Does our extension of grace have boundaries rather than an encampment that we will not cross? The third and final view is from Michael Dyson's book, Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America. The device Michael uses throughout his book is that of writing to previously killed young Black Americans and asking them questions about the moments unfolding before us in our daily living. Here is one particularly poignant example. My dear Emmett, meaning Emmett Till, the siege of Black Death at the hands of our fellow citizens and by nature's fury has brought our nation to its collective senses. Rarely has the tragic fact of Black Death been as urgently in need of interpretation and engagement as at this moment. America has been trying for a couple centuries now to reconcile its self-image as a shining beacon of democracy with the nation's corrupted and unjust practices. We have promised time and time again to change from within, motivated by some crises, moved by some uprising, shamed by some catastrophe that wore on our consciences. Mr. Dyson then asks questions centered, I feel, to have us be in the moment, appreciate our time of grace. He asks, something feels different now, but how far are we willing to go? Are we prepared to sacrifice tradition and convention for genuine transformation? Are we ready to reckon with the disastrous social forces that have been unleashed in such an unprecedented fashion? Miranda McPherson tells us in answering her question of what is grace, that grace is the living presence that brings online the qualities of our true nature. Those divine qualities are sown into the very fabric of our very being, so they are always present. She notes that grace has 4 primary dimensions, or ways that it comes alive. The when that we've been considering today. Grace is simultaneously, she writes, the unchanging ground of your being. Grace is the blessings that refine, uplift, and nourish you. Grace is the transforming power that lifts your veil. And ultimately, grace is more easeful, spiritually elegant, a way of being in this world from a consciousness way beyond it. But every dimension of grace needs space. It needs you to empty out your fixed positions and presumptions. Sometimes even your cherished spiritual you values. And so we hear yet more words that speak to us about the intertwining of grace and surrender. We have to take time to allow the moments when the wonders of the divine can slip in, not just on Sunday mornings. May grace be with you this week ahead, and may you make room so grace can really slip in. May it be so. Please join us in singing our closing hymn, 307, The Human Touch Can Light the Flame. Now speak together our unison benediction. Engage with the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Please remain for our postlude. Please don't forget the budget meeting in Fisk Hall.